Hi, welcome to the training webinar. I'm Dale Franks, and today we are going to talk about processes and sub-processes and cloned processes. So it's going to start off with some fairly basic stuff, but we're going to build on that and get reasonably complex by the end of this webinar. Before we get into the processes and sub-processes, I do want to remind you about the community that we created on Circle. It's a user community, and it has a lot of cool stuff in it that I want to point out. So I'm trying to give people reasons to use this. Generally, I monitor this, as does Francis Moritz, who heads our implementation team. So there's generally somebody around. Now, I'm not a fanatic about monitoring it. I do have other things that I have to do rather than just hang out in the community, but I am doing a couple of things to try to make this more worthwhile for you to go see from just a user or customer perspective. So one of the channels that I have created in the Process Director group is this new features channel. Now, these are chat channels, so you can drop into any of these channels and discuss whatever you'd like. One of the things that I've been doing on the new features channel is going over changes that are being made to the product, things that are going to be upcoming. In fact, I think at this point, if you want a good idea about what we're going to be talking about in the Feature Spotlight webinar, you can probably go here and get a good preview of it. So whenever there is a significant change that I think you may want to talk about, not just changes to the product, but also changes that I make to the documentation, things that I add and what have you, I'm posting them here in this new features channel. We have several other channels there, one for general discussion and technical discussion. This is not really meant to replace the tech support system. It's basically more of a conversational thing, but it would be a great place to go if you just have some quick questions that you would like me or maybe another forum member to answer. There are also a couple of general channels here that are just posting. For example, there's an events channel. Right now, there's apparently some sort of webinar going on that is currently happening. There is an announcements channel. So as we come up with things that we figure we need to announce, we'll announce it here. Right now, it's just sort of the hello message. There's also a guides and help channel, tell you how to use the community, things about the 15 for Friday program, how to get started with BP Logix if you're a new customer. There's also something I've done here. I've added AI agents. Whenever you do a search, so you want to search for something in the product, I have a Process Director developer agent. So if your questions have anything to do with like the custom bars file or anything else in the developer's guide, you can go here. Anything having to do with implementation or system administration, you can ask the implementer agent. I'm sure he's not going to know what PROC is, but this is basically an AI chatbot. It's different than the one that I have on the documentation website. So it didn't know what PROC was, but it decided to start throwing stuff at me to see if, throwing stuff at the wall to see if anything sticks just with the word PROC. It's actually a pretty good little AI agent. There's also a life sciences agent, although no one here today is a life sciences customer, and you don't have any of our life sciences products like PubPro or Pruvia, so that won't be relevant to you, but you can ask it here in the search. It has its own little chat window. There is also a direct message. You can direct message any of the agents as well. So if you do have some questions that are covered in our documentation, because what I've done is I fed the database guide or the database reference and the developer's guide into the developer agent, and I fed the implementer's guide and the custom tasks and the system administration documentation all into the implementer agent. So it's another place that you can go if you want to ask questions and get an answer from an AI agent, which will take your query and come up with what it thinks is the correct response. Having played around with it, it is, I think, based on the questions I've asked, and the problem is I kind of know how to ask the questions. So it gives me the answers I want generally. And I have divided the developer and the implementer into two separate agents because there's a lot of questions that you ask. I've noticed on the documentation where you've asked a question and what you really want is some sort of implementation answer, and it gives you a development answer, something from the SDK. So I've bifurcated those two things out so that they're separate agents, so that whenever you ask a question about development, you just ask the development agent. And for the implementation, it won't give you answers from the developer's guide. So I think it's based on the queries I've asked, as I started to say earlier, I think it's a little better than the one that is on the documentation site. That may be an artifact, though, of the fact that I was able in this implementation to split it off into two separate AI agents. In any event, it's on Circle. It's community.bplogix.com. And if you want an invite, I think pretty much everybody here is probably already part of the community. But please go to the community and participate, ask questions, talk to other people. The more that we can get people into the community and using the community, I think the easier it will be and the faster it will be for you to be able to ask questions and get answers, if not from somebody at BP Logix, from another community member. So this is another thing that's available to you. I'm doing some things to add some information to it that I don't really have any other place to add it, like little updates to the product or to the documentation. I can add them here and they can just show up as messages. And so maybe you'll find that has a little bit more use to you, but the community is open and we encourage your participation. I've been meaning to talk about that for a while. I just haven't, I always forget. Could you remind us how to get to this community? It is at community.bplogix.com to get there. Now, depending on the product that you have, so you're all process director people, so you're going to have a specific invite, a specific link to that community. So I tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to move this off the screen. And even though I don't want to post it in a video that we're going to see on YouTube, and thanks for that question, Dan. Even though I don't want to show it on YouTube, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the invite link for this community. If you're already a member, though, all you need to do is go to community.bplogix.com. Oh, also, there are mobile apps, and they're even planning a desktop app in their roadmap, but there are Android and iOS apps that you can download from the App Store. I have it on my phone so that I can monitor what's going on in the community. So that makes it a little bit easier for you. But it's always accessible on the web at community.bplogix.com. So you can always get to the community there and then just log in with your username and password. For those of you who are not members of the community, I am going to give you a special invite link real quick. So I have to navigate through here to the right portion, and I have to go to invite links. And oh, by the way, we're going to be using this for beta too. For those of you who are part of the beta for 6.1. Was it 300? Whatever it was for that beta program, we use Discord. That actually worked out pretty great. And we're able to get a lot of feedback and we're able to have conversations via Discord. We liked that. Didn't like that Discord is so gaming focused. It's not very professional. So we went to something that is like Discord, Circle, but that is really designed for professional communities. So you don't get a whole bunch of Fortnite notifications whenever you go onto Circle. So we want Process Director. I'm going to copy this invite link. So if you don't have a community account yet, where is chat? There is chat. And I am going to paste this invite link into chat, and I'm going to set it to go to everyone. And there we go. I've set it. So that is the invite link. If you respond to that link and create your account, it will automatically make you a member of the Process Director community, and you can start participating. If you're already a member, just go to community.bplogix.net. Dan, I know that you're a member because I've seen your name pop up in the sidebar. So I know you exist. So community.bplogix.com is the place that you need to go for the community. Let us now turn our attention to processes and subprocesses. And I should probably have one here. So let me create one really quick. And we will just call this processes. And we'll just create an application shell here so that we can get started. We don't care much about the form at this point. We're going to care some about it later. Right now, we care about just the process itself. So a couple of things about processes and subprocesses. Most of us are used to the regular process. It's when we start going into subprocesses, or as we'll talk about in a bit, cloned processes, or just generating completely new processes de novo from an existing process. Sometimes that gets a little bit tricky, and the way that they work is you have to do some configuration, and depending on your use case, it can get tricky. And I'll give you a tricky example of that in a little bit later. So when you start a process, you have this list of activities, however many that you have, and that constitutes your process. In most cases, as I've said many, many times, a process is generally started by the submission of a form. That's probably 90+% of all use cases. A user submits a form, that kicks off a process. That's pretty straightforward. Now, whenever we create a process timeline definition and the submission of that form kicks off the process, it creates a process instance. I suppose we should go ahead and do that so that we have one. So I'm going to run my form, which currently you saw me just create it from a template. It has no controls in it, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to submit this form. And I will submit it as soon as the form compiles and shows on the screen. You would think that a blank form would be able to display fairly quickly, but I guess you would be wrong on first use. I guess the form has to be compiled, and it takes what appears to be an extraordinarily long time. So we're waiting to do this for a purpose, because I have a point. I probably should have created this before the webinar and opened the form at least once so that it was already compiled rather than just create it on the fly. But here we go. We've got a form, has no form controls. Don't really care about the form controls. I'm going to go ahead and submit. I haven't done any configuration on the process timeline or anything, but I am now in the running instance because I can see the complete button here, which is the default button if you don't add any results. We're going to move this out of the way here for just a moment and go back over here to the content list. So now that I've submitted this form, it has invoked a process. By invoking the process, it creates a copy of the timeline definition, in this case, to create a timeline instance. And so this is my timeline instance. It has its own instance name, which I didn't change, so it's really the default name. And then in parentheses, the form that is attached to the process timeline. That's sort of the default naming convention in Process Director. Notice that I have two nodes below the timeline definition. I have the active timelines and the completed timelines node. I have nothing in completed timelines, obviously, so there's no reason to even look there. Anytime that we are in these two nodes, what we will see when we click on the name is the properties for the process timeline instance. In most cases, there are a couple of exceptions, especially because we're adding some new stuff to the process timeline to allow you to do some timeline management from a knowledge view. So you can just throw a knowledge view. Right now, there's one thing that you can do on a knowledge view. There is a manage process user icon that you can add to a knowledge view. And when you click it, it will enable you to manage the users in a particular process or process timeline activity. So you can do that from a knowledge view. We're just about to do an add me to the task. Well, the work on it is more or less done. So in the next release of Process Director, there'll be an add me to task icon in the knowledge view so that you can just show it if you decide to. And when you click it, it will just automatically add the user who clicks it, whoever the current user is, it will add them to a process timeline task, or actually a user task. So that's kind of cool. But for the most part, if you have to do any management of a process timeline instance, this is where you're going to go. One of the reasons why that we tell you, if you have any document attachments, always attach them to the process, is because the form is already a process attachment. In fact, we saw that from just the name of this timeline, where it includes the name of the form right there in parentheses as part of the process timeline instance name. You can obviously change this if you want, but by default, that's what it does for the naming convention. So my form is already here. So if I go to timeline items, it's going to show me all of the attachments to the process here. Now, I don't have any other than the form itself, so it's not very impressive. But if I attached all of my document attachments, then they would all be here as well. So having everything attached to the process makes finding items that are associated with that timeline instance much easier, and then you can find them, make changes to them. You can edit them, whatever it is that you want to do, or you can just open them directly from the process timeline instance. So that's a pretty cool thing to be able to do. For the most part, though, the reason why, and I just did the thing that I didn't want to do. Most of the reason why you want to do that and have everything in one place is because this is where your management of your process timeline is going to take place. We often get tech support tickets about, the timeline is doing something wonky. I don't know how to fix it. Generally, the place to fix it is here in the process timeline instance. So when I have a running process that will show up in active timelines, I can open it. Also, by the way, active timelines, there are some things that you can do, but we do have a little help for you. We have the name contains. One of the reasons why, if we're going to use this naming convention, and I suppose I should back up a little bit, and let's take a look at the process timeline and just look at the naming convention itself. Okay, so the instantiated name for the timeline is the timeline definition name. So these are all system variables. So in this case, it's going to be processes webinar TL. And then the timeline attachments, and it's looking specifically for the object type of form, and the pre and post aren't really used except to ensure that there are no leading or trailing spaces, but well, actually it adds the parentheses as well, but that's what gives us our name. One of the reasons why, because you usually don't go in here and change the instantiated name of a timeline. You certainly can, but in what appears to be pure serendipity, using this as the default naming convention for the process timeline automatically makes the form name part of the timeline instance name. And that's why we always tell you on the form to come up with a form instance name that has some sort of uniquely searchable value in it. Now, at BP Logix, we always recommend using a sequence number to give you a unique value for each request so that you can search for a specific request. Also, maybe throwing in the submitter's name is a good idea, because when I go into my active timelines here and I need to find your timeline, because the form name is by default part of the timeline instance name, or I guess I should say the form instance name is part of the timeline instance name. If I have some unique value, I can easily search it here with the name contains. If I wanted to search for everybody or every request submitted by a particular user, I could just put their name in here and I could find all their requests. Or on a specific date, I could type that in here and get all the requests for a specific date. So it's very useful to be able to find your process timelines that are, a little, that have gone a little wonky, and to fix them. And to fix them, as I said previously, you're going to go here to the timeline instance. Now, the timeline status tab is basically just a routing slip. And really the only thing you can do here is sort of change up the items that you can see on the routing slip. I think most of the time you don't need to go through and check any of these. I think this generally gives us the information that we want to see in a routing slip, and it will show you what activities have passed. There's only one activity, and because it's in green, it lets you know it's the currently running activity, so it's the one that's active, and it just gives you an idea of what the current status of the process is. Where the real magic happens is when you go to the administration/timeline tab, because when you go there, that gives you access to each of the individual activity instances that are running. So in this case, I have activity 1. I'm going to go ahead and mouse over it, and it gives me basically a refresh of the routing slip that just gives me the basic information. But the real power lies in right-clicking that. And yes, I can restart an activity. I can cancel an activity. But the real power is in properties, because that will now open up the properties for that specific activity and let me begin making changes to it. Yes, I can cancel and restart the activity from here. I can also cancel the entire timeline. But now I get into the ability to add users or to even do more. So let's go with Diana, my go-to example. And I can just put Diana's name in here, and I can say original assignee is out sick, and I can add Diana. And now Diana has been added to this by me as an administrator because the original assignee is out sick. So now I've got a reason for adding and removing Diana. Now, let's say I was out sick and I click on my name. Well, I get a whole bunch of different options here for what I want to do with me as the user. Because I am the user and I am not in fact out sick, I am here. I have the open my task. So it will just open the form in task context for me if I happen to be a assignee, and I can complete my task from there. If it is a different user, again, it's me, so completing the task completes my user task, but I can complete it in lieu of the user. I can cancel the user out of a task. So in this case, perhaps what I've done is I'm out sick. Diana's going to take over for me. I'm never going to complete this activity. It needs to be done today. So I can go ahead and cancel the user in the task. So I can cancel Dale Franks, or I can remove Dale Franks from this task just by clicking remove user, and it moves me out of the task. I could do the same for Diana as well, of course. I could pick any user and I can complete their task. So if I complete Diana's task, there we go. The task is complete. It was completed by Diana. I believe it was set for first user to complete for this, but I don't remember because I didn't actually do anything to configure this process timeline. But clearly my task is done. Diana Stewart has completed it. Well, that's not true because Dale Franks completed the task, and so it wasn't Diana Stewart. It was administratively completed by me, and I didn't change the administrative comment, so it still says original assignee is out sick. I probably should have put a better message there that said I'm doing this as an administrator. I do want to restart the timeline because I do want this thing to be rerunning here. So there we go. We've restarted it and it's now back to me. Let's look at some of the, well, I do need to add a new user here because I want to have the full panoply of options that I have. So let me re-add Diana. So let me add and start her as a user. There we go. Now Diana is back. And once again, well, for the refresh, I'm not getting all the same users here. So let me just go ahead and cancel that timeline and close it. Let's just run the processes form again and grab another one. So we'll just run and submit. And once again, I'm going to go back and see all of our original options. By the way, because I completed that timeline and I went ahead and canceled it, it is now in the completed timelines node. So I can open it up from there. I shouldn't have completed the timeline at first. I should have completed the timeline last so that we wouldn't lose our fidelity on what's going on with this activity and what I can do with it. We talked about completing the task, removing user. I can restart the user in the tasks, which is not restarting the task itself. It's just restarting that specific user. So what it'll do is it'll prompt the user task assignment for that selected user. Again, they'll get another task assignment email by doing it. This is different than starting the activity. I could have 5 users in this activity. And if I restart the activity, it'll restart all 5 users. If I only want to restart a single user in an activity, I can do that. I can also simply just resend them their email. So I don't actually have to restart them. Now, I know they're going to get an email if I restart it, but depending on how your task is configured, if I restart them, it may restart a clock on the task and expand their due date to some date in the future. That may be farther in the future than I would like. So in that case, I might not want to restart the task, but I would want to resend their email. And then I have the ability to reassign the user, and I can reassign a user in this activity. But I should probably add another user there. And now we can reassign user. And let's give her a second. And there we go. By reassigning, I have taken the task away from me. So it's no longer my task. And now I've given the task to Diana Stewart, who I added in the search box. So this gives me a lot of control over user assignments and how I want user assignments to work and all of the other things that go along with user assignment. I guess I can close that form there since I'm no longer assigned the task. So that gives me the access to the properties of the timeline uh, activity instance itself. And that's where you generally have to go to do a lot of user administration. And if you're going to add yourself to a task, this is where until version, dot 400 comes out, this is where you have to go to add yourself to a task in the system. In dot 400, you'll be able to do that directly from from an ology. While I'm here looking at my process timeline in the timeline/administration tab, I can pop open the form. If I do, it will open the form in non-task context. So it'll just open the form, but if you don't have a task assigned, or if you have a task assigned, it will not open it in task context for you. I can open up the process timeline definition simply by clicking that button there. I can cancel the timeline outright, and there is a refresh button here that allows me to refresh the process timeline. This is also where I go if I have a process in error. This is where I'm going to go to fix that process in error. In fact, let's go ahead and try to break a process timeline. Let me go back to active timelines. Let me go ahead and cancel this timeline simply so I don't have anything running here. And let's talk about processes in error. Let me build one real quick. So we'll go back up here to, I wish I'd have thought of this years ago to be able to, quickly generate a blank form and process timeline. I guess I'm just dumb. So we're going to go to our process timeline here. We're going to have to change the definition. I'm going to try to make it error out here. So I'm going to give it a result, and we'll just call it done. And I should actually make another one, which is also done, because both of them will finish my activity. I am not going to make it a default result. I'm going to go to the completed when tab, and I'm going to try to complete the task without setting a default result. So we'll go to when any result condition is met, and I will complete the activity when, let's see if this works, value a equals a. I don't want to add a condition, so let me get rid of that. That was a mistake. I wanted to hit OK. So it should complete the task when A equals A, but I have two results that don't have a default. So when I run this, it should go a little bit wonky. Okay, I don't know what I just did there. Please save my process timeline. Oh no. Ah, gotta do it again. Rats. Back to string A equals string A. Okay. Close. Update. All right, that should replicate my problem. So we'll go ahead and we'll hit OK there. And we will, I don't actually need to run and submit the form. I could probably just start the activity because we don't really care about the form much here. So I'm just going to run the process timeline directly. And I don't even care about the form per se, even though the form is going to show up. I want to go ahead and look at the active timelines. Wrong one. It's the error one that I want. This is going to get confusing quick, isn't it? Let's go to active timelines. I have an active timeline. That looks fine. That's what I want to see. One or more activities are in an error state. This is what a broken timeline instance looks like. Now, in this case, I intentionally created the error by the way that I set the results. I have multiple results for the process timeline, and I have a completion condition. Now, if I have a completion condition, one of those two results that I set, result one or result two, one of them needs to be the default, because we can't really complete the task until a user task result has been entered. Since I didn't set a default result, and you can only have one default result, since I didn't set it, now the timeline doesn't know what to do. It's gone all wonky, and it's going to tell me that, by the way. If I scroll over here, it's going to say putting activity into an error state because too many results met condition. All of them did, because my condition was independent of the results, and no default setting. So that's telling me that I just didn't have a default. I didn't have a default set. So I can fix that easily, although I can't fix it in the instance. This is a configuration problem. I can fix the process timeline, but I am going to have to come back here and restart this activity to make it work. The problem is that I don't really know what processes are in error. Now, we provide you at the support site, it's downloadable. We provide you with a set of knowledge views. So I'm going to turn my system folders here on in the content list, and I believe it's here in knowledge views where we give you a processes in error knowledge view, which you can in fact run, and it will show you all of the processes on the system that are in error, which in my case is only one system, or only one instance. This is a very useful knowledge view. However, I don't like it. I don't like it because in my view, it's missing something that I use all the time. I don't really care who the initiator was most often. What I care about is, where is this instance? Now, over here, I can look at the properties for the instance. That's great. I can look at any of the references to it, that, other objects that refer to it. I can, view any of the processes that are running. All this is great. And I can manage process users. So that opens up this manage process users, and I can do all of the things with the user here as I normally could, but that's not my problem. My problem is the timeline definition. And I don't know, or I might not know, where this error webinar timeline lives. So what I would really want is the path here. So if you have this set of knowledge views that you can download from the support site, what I would do if it were me is I would go into this knowledge view and I would add a column to add the object's file path. Having the error message, that's great. All this is great, but I think what I would do is I would go here into the columns, and I guess the initiator might be useful sometimes. So, okay, I'm going to leave that there. I'm just going to add a column, and I think I'm going to move it up. And by the way, we are going to be changing this so you can drag and drop all of these columns from one area to another, just like we did with the custom tasks on a form definition. We're just going to give you those those sorting icons where you can just drag and drop it. I'm just going to call this path, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to choose object information folder path. And now I can update and run this. And now I can see where this process exists. Training webinar, processes and subprocesses, error, error webinar TL. Great. Now I know how to get to that definition because this is an error that is configuration based. I can also create my own processes in error knowledge view if you want. It's not that difficult. I know I've talked about doing this before, but let's just go ahead and build one super quick. Proc in error. And I don't really care about any of these columns. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete them because all they do is take up space. I probably want to know the running activity name, but you can put whatever columns that you want in here. I'm just going to care about the name, the path, object information, if I can find it, folder path, and the running activity. And I want the running activity because that's going to tell me usually the activity. Well, it's going to tell me the activity in error because that's where the process timeline is going to be held up. Although conceivably there could be multiple activities running at the same time. So let's go with running activity name. Actually, no, we'll run to activity in error. That way I don't have to worry if there are multiple activities running. Oh, I do need to associate this with a timeline if I'm going to pick activity in error. So what I would do here is activity in error. That's going to be the same for any timeline instance. I'm going to go and look for the doc, and I am going to search for activity in error because I think we can just use the why am I searching for this? System variables, timeline activity system variables. Duh, I know where it is. And do we have activity in error? Yes, we do. Thank you. Activity in error, format activity name. That's what I want right there. This should work. So what I would do here for the running activity, since it wants to associate with a timeline, if I pick it from here, I'm just going to go to value and go to string. And I'm just going to go like that. And I got to do a couple of other things. First of all, I got to come over here and turn off everything but timeline instances because I only want it to return timeline instances to me. And I should now be able to update and run it. I need a filter. I forgot the filter because that's going to show me way more than I want to see. I got to filter it. There were two things I needed to do. Timeline activity, activity in error. Wait. Process in error. That's what I'm looking for right there. Process in error equals yes, because I want it only to show me things that are all messed up. And I only have one thing that's messed up. So there we go. Now it shows me what my running activity is, my processes, and this will open up. Now this will open up because I'm returning timeline instances. When I click on the timeline instance, it wants to show me the form, and that's not what I want it to do. So the last thing I need to do for this is to go to the Configure tab, and I want to, where is it? Perform this action when entry clicked. I want to look at the properties. Okay, and so now I should be able to run it, run, and when I click on it, it shows me the properties for the timeline instance. Great. So I can generate a process as an error real easy just by running through the steps that I ran through just now. Now, as I said, my problem here is that the activity is in an error state, and it's a configuration problem. Sometimes I can fix it because, the task was assigned to someone. They're no longer there. They've left the company and I've gotten rid of them. I've disabled their user account, but there's still a task assigned to them. So when the task assignment pops up in the instance, it tries to find that user who's disabled, and it then errors out. It says, hey, there's nobody who can do this task. Or even worse, it doesn't error out and it just says, okay, well, there's no user available. I'll just move on with my day. That's a different problem. We'll have to track that differently. But a lot of times, task assignment problems will cause something to go into error. And that's easy to fix here because, yes, while I am going to ultimately probably have to fix the configuration, I have the ability to just go into this activity and manage the users. So I can, replace this user with somebody else and do whatever I have to there. Being able to find your processes in error, I didn't mean to go back to the timeline instance, being able to find my process in error, to go to the administration timeline tab and to see what the error is and to open it up and see why it's in error should give me some idea of how to fix it. Now, you're going to get some error messages that are kind of standard, but you have to kind of know what they're telling you. Object not found. An object not found is usually accompanied by a message that says, that the document or the form control or whatever object it can't find, it will tell you, I can't find the object document with the ID, and then it'll give you the UID for that document, which, okay, granted, not always easy to know what document they're talking about. Or form control ID. I can't find form control ID, whatever. Knowing what is missing often tells you whether the error is with the timeline itself or with your configuration. Object not found is almost always a configuration problem. Object not found, form control ID, whatever. That tells me that there's a problem with your form. So the way to fix that problem with your form is to go back and look at your form controls tab of the form and see if you have deleted any form controls or have any form controls marked for deletion, but that haven't actually been deleted. This is especially common if I have a form control. Let's say I have a form control called input one. And it's on the form, and then I go back and I delete input one and save the form. And then later on, I come back and I create a drop-down control called input one. If I have not gone into the form controls tab of the form definition and deleted all the fields marked for definition, that may cause me a problem. Now, we do a lot of error checking in the background to try to fix that, but it's super complex and sometimes things fall through the cracks. And so whenever I have a control that has the name X, I delete it or I remove it from the template. Let's be precise in our language. I remove it from the template. That marks the control for deletion, but it hasn't been deleted. I still have an input box that's called, X. And if I replace X with a drop-down control or a list box or a date picker, that I name X. Okay, well, it's a completely different data type if it's a date picker. So there's all sorts of things going on there. But I've got a control called X that was an input box that was removed. I've now got, let's say, a date picker called X that is not an input box. So if I had any existing data in there, I couldn't remap it to X. Look, this all gets complicated. Form control ID not found generally means that you have a form control that you should have deleted but didn't. In general, when you go to a form, and I know this is not process, but I'm explaining what can make a process go wonky. When you go to the form controls tab, if you see at the top here a little message that says delete all controls marked for deletion, you should probably, certainly in a production environment, you should never see that. Before you go to production, you should know what form controls you want deleted, and you should delete them. So when you go into production, I should never have a control marked for deletion. I should have already taken care of that. That is just one source of the form control not found. Now look, sometimes like with 6.1.00 whatever, there was an issue where it wasn't seeing conditions. So it may be, object not found, condition ID equals, that tells me that somewhere, either in field dropdowns or in set form data, or in one of, well, I don't have any controls to show you any properties, but in one of the properties for the controls, there's like a condition for visibility or enabling, or a condition to fill a dropdown, or a condition to run a set form data, and that condition set is missing. The trouble with condition sets is even if I know what the ID is, condition set and form controls are tricky. Even if I know what the ID is of a form control, that doesn't really help me much. And same thing with a condition, it doesn't help me much. When you drop a text box on a form, it doesn't tell you what the form control ID is for that form. IDs for a content list object, like a form definition or a process timeline definition, I can use those GUIDs. I mean, I can, if worse comes to worse, query the database for that GUID to find out what that object is. And ultimately, I think I can do it in a knowledge view as well. In fact, if you have this version of Process Director or higher, the 6.1, okay, it's 6.1, I forget where we did it, but the search box up here, I'll show you to be able to find a content list object. Here's my form, process ID, form ID. Here's the form ID. I didn't get the A. AEB. Okay, there's my form ID. I probably don't even need the whole ID, actually. But if I drop in the object ID of an object in the search box, it's going to find the object for me in the content list. So if it is a content list object, I can definitely find it simply by throwing the GUID, the ID of the object, in the search box in the content list. That is the form ID that I just pasted there, and it knows what the form ID is, and it's going to find my error webinar form. So you do have some troubleshooting things that you can do with processes to fix them. What time is it? Oh my goodness, it's almost 11 o'clock. We're way behind, but we're getting way into some important details here, especially in terms of being able to troubleshoot stuff. So being able to find that process going into its instance definition and finding out what that error is often gives you a real good way of fixing it. Now, this error is just telling me that this is a configuration error. That I can fix pretty easily. Because if I go back to my error webinar timeline, and I can do a couple of things here. I can open up this activity and I can go back to the results and I can just make 1, the default result. That certainly works. And I hit OK. I've saved my process timeline. Let's go back to my active timelines. We'll go back to my one that's in error. Now I have fixed my configuration issue. I should be able to restart this activity. And it still tells me the activity is in error state. The message at the top doesn't go away until I refresh the page, but I already know that this activity is no longer in an error state. And the way that I know that is that the little red background for activity 1 has now disappeared. Now, if I go ahead and refresh, I can get rid of the error message. The error message is gone. Activity 1 is running, and activity 1 is done. It ran, it met its result condition. A does in fact equal A. I had a default result of 1 set. This activity completed on its own without requiring any intervention from me, but I certainly cleared the error out immediately by changing the incorrect configuration that I had set up here, which is an important thing to know, because what that means is if I make a change to a definition, process timeline, form, whatever it is, and I save that definition, it now gets replicated immediately to all of my process instances. That change just goes into effect immediately. Well, some of those changes do. Well, I'll talk about that in a second too. So because my changes take place immediately, all I have to do is refresh this activity and restart it. Well, now go back to my process timeline definition, find all of the properties that are supposed to be associated with that activity when it restarts, and we'll create the new activity instance, which will have all of the updated info because changes take place immediately in most cases. And once it knows that there's changes, it will just apply those changes. And as in this case, it cleared that error out for me completely. Now, this is not always true whenever we're dealing with a process. So now that this process is no longer an error process, I guess we don't need to look at it anymore. Let's go back over here to this process. And let me create another activity, activity 2, and I'll just make it dependent here. And I will now run this a couple of times. So let's get a couple of running instances going. And you know what? I'll go ahead and complete that first activity and then close down my form. And then let's make one more here, and we'll go ahead and keep it in activity 1. Okay, great. We'll just close out that form. We'll go back here and look at our active timelines node. And there are my 2 running timelines. One is running in activity 1 and one is running in activity 2. We're now going to discuss the exception to making a change in the process timeline takes place automatically. Because what we're going to do is we're going to go here into our process timeline, and we're going to delete activity 2. Actually, let's delete activity 1 because it'll give us a much more visually stimulating view of what happens when we do this. I am going to remove this activity. Okay, great. That looks pretty good. I've removed that activity. I'm just going to go ahead and save and close my process timeline. Look at the top of my screen. It looked like I saved and closed my process timeline, but there is a problem. Deleting activities is a big exception to the my running process instance will just automatically update itself with the changes I make to the process definition. This is a big exception for very good reasons. I have people actually running in activity 1. It is a valid activity. I can't delete it from the definition yet. So it looked like everything was fine. I deleted my activity. I saved my process timeline. And it even tells me the timeline has been saved. So, you know, good, I guess. But then it tells me this. The activity was deleted, but there are activities still running. Those need to be canceled or completed to delete the activity. And in fact, if I do go and open up my process timeline, I get this weirdness down here. Activity one is still here. It is, it doesn't have a type. It doesn't have an icon of any sort. It is still a user activity because that's the type of activity it was originally. But this is an activity that has been marked for deletion. Now, if I had other, and by the way, we should note it has no dependencies. If what will happen, I should have probably made another activity just to show you the how it now breaks the it now breaks this activity out of the critical path. So it removes all of its dependencies. It also removes the dependencies of anything that was dependent on it, because usually if I delete that activity and there's a dependency on it, I've changed that dependency to a different activity. And so what happens is this activity just becomes this little orphan activity that's just going to sit out here, but I can't delete it. I can't delete it until, I don't need to save that. I can't delete it until I get out of activity one over here. So I have to complete this activity. So I am in fact going to do so. And notice on my instance, it's also changed here. It also takes it out of the critical path, and it kind of drops it down here as sort of this orphaned deal. In oldie times, back sometime, I think in the early releases of version 5 somewhere. It may even go back to 4.5 or something. What we used to do when you deleted a timeline activity is that we just deleted it and we threw all of the process timeline instances into an error state and said, okay, if you're going to delete instances from, or timeline activities from a running instance, that's on you, man. You got to fix it as an administrator. There was pushback from customers, so we changed the product. So now, whenever you delete a timeline activity, if there are, processes in flight, then we're not going to allow you to delete the activity. We'll remove it from the dependency chain and we'll sort of set it off on its own. But the people who are still running in that activity, they get to complete that activity. Now, in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and cancel activity one. And activity one is done. And there we go. Activity one is complete. Now I have nobody running in activity one. And what that means is I can come back here and I can click on activity one and I can remove that activity and I can hit OK again. And now I get the simple message that my timeline has been saved. Now that no one is running in activity one, I can remove that activity and I can delete it. But Process Director is not going to let me fully delete it until all of my running instances of it are done. Because the activity, once I tried to delete it, is now kind of orphaned, it just gets pulled out of the critical path. Nobody else ever gets assigned to that activity. It only sticks around until the people who are currently running in it are done. Once they're done, you are going to have to come back into your timeline definition and you are going to have to delete it. This is the one big exception to if I change my definition, the running instance just automatically updates and implements my changes. Deleting an activity doesn't do that. Hasn't for a while, but Those of you who've been customers for a while may remember, deleting an activity and then seeing like 5 running instances popping up in processes and errors saying, "Oh, we don't know what we're supposed to do now. This activity has been deleted. We don't know where we're supposed to go or what's supposed to happen." So we just drop it into an error state. Now, our justification for that was we don't know what you were trying to intend when you deleted that activity. So if you're going to delete an activity from a running timeline as an administrator, you now need to go into each one of those running instances and you need to determine how you want the instance to go, because you've deleted that activity. So what do I want to do with those users? Do I want to cancel that running activity? Do I want to, well, I guess cancel would be the one thing you could do. Do I want to add those users to a different activity? Whatever the change path, you would have to do that manually. Like I said, customers didn't want to do that. They wanted magic to happen. And so the magic that we made happen was they get to stay in their activity. And then once that activity is done, we are going to go to whatever the next activity was supposed to be. That can still error out if I delete like 3 activities, all of which were dependent on each other and all of which were running. That's going to get tricky and the system may not know how to handle that. But we're sort of minimizing the requirement that you go into the instances. But managing your instances all has to be done there in the instance selection for active timelines. There's usually not much that you need to do for completed timelines. They've already completed, they're done. We don't really care about fixing those up. All right, let's talk about sub-processes. I had this idea that we would just flow through all of this information and it would go really quickly. And clearly I was wrong about that. So let's create a new setup here. Let's talk about sub-processes. So once again, we'll just create a new little application that we'll call sub-processes. Sub-processes can be tricky. And so there's some things you need to keep in mind about how they work. So how do we invoke a sub-process? Now there's 2 ways in Process Director. I want to do something that's a little advanced here. So I'm going to have to build a process timeline. And I'm just going to throw the loop in right now. It's going to get more complex as we go. So we'll just call this a parent activity. For now, we're not going to fill out any looping stuff, although we are here in a little bit. And I'm going to create a couple of child activities. That's not a child activity. I don't have to remove it. I can just bring it under. I didn't want to bring it under that parent. I wanted to bring it under that one. There we go. So I have activity 1.1 and 1.2. We're going to call this invoke process. Now, I've demonstrated this before. In fact, there's an entire webinar on sub-processes and invoking them. So I'm just going to give you the highlights here. There's 2 ways to invoke a sub-process in Process Director: synchronously or asynchronously. Synchronously means that I am going to have to use the process activity type, and I'm going to have to specify a sub-process to begin. I think in this case, I should make just a separate sub-process. Although, assuming I don't run out of time, we're going to get a little more complex than that. So I'm going to make a new process timeline. process timeline, and I am actually, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and create a form and a process because there's something that I may want to demonstrate later. I may demonstrate it from somewhere else. In fact, I probably will since it's already complete and I may run out of time. But we'll call this, um, we'll call it second process since I've already rather stupidly named the first one sub processes. Well, actually, no, we can do that. I have processes and I have sub processes. You know what? I'm sorry. Let's just get rid of this. Let's go back here to my process. And I need to sub-process over our timeline. Activity 1. It's still a user activity. Okay, great. Great. So let's go back up here to my process. So now I've got a process and I have a sub-process running down here. So we'll go to activity 2. And we're going to recapitulate what I just did, but which I didn't save. We're going to call this a parent close. And now we are going to create child activity and create child activity. And once again, we'll call activity 1.1 invoke sub-process, and we will make it a process activity type. We're also going to close this and we're going to update it right now so that we save our configuration and don't lose it. And I don't have to reconfigure it a third time. So on the process tab, a synchronous, the process activity type allows me to create a synchronous sub process, which is to say that my parent timeline will stop dead in the water and will wait until whatever sub process I invoke is completed. A couple of things are going to happen. It is going to copy all of the objects that are in the parent timeline by default. I can turn it off by default. It's going to copy everything from the parent process to the child process. So that means all of my forms, all of my document attachments and what have you, they're all going to get transferred to the sub process. Then I'm going to do whatever the sub process says I have to do. And when that's done, all of the items in the sub process, so the sub process form, any new document attachments or what have you, those are all going to be sent back up to the parent process. So my parent process will contain as attachments, ideally, the form from the parent process, the form from the sub process, all of my document attachments that were made in the parent process, and all of the ones that were made in the child process. Everything is going to be consolidated when the child process is finished back up into the parent process. Now, I can limit that. I can obviously turn off these two checkboxes if I want to completely eliminate that. But usually you don't. Usually whenever you want to limit the documents that are going one way or the other, you'll just pick specific groups by setting a group name. But other than that, in most cases, I'm not going to make any of those changes. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go find my timeline that I want to start when the process begins, and it's going to start my sub process. And my main process is going to stay here in the invoke sub process step until the sub process is done. So I'm going to go ahead and save my parent timeline here. I am going to give my sub process activity name a more logical name so we can see what's going on. So I will call this sub user activity. So that's my sub-process user activity, so that I can see that running. Okay. And on my processes webinar form, I am going to make a little change. I'm going to drop a routing slip on there so that we can actually see what is going on. Although we can open up the timeline. Actually, you know what? Never mind. We'll do it from the process timeline because today we don't care much about forms. So let's kick off my processes webinar timeline. Just for normative purposes, I am going to run and submit my form, after which I think we'll just forget about the form. But now we're submitted, and I'm running in an activity. Let's look at my processes webinar timeline. Actually, let's look at our active timelines. So what's going on is that I incorrectly configured my process timeline, and this is going to get confusing. So we're just going to cancel that, and we're going to come down here and cancel the other one as well, because I made a little mistake. Oh, it's completed. I don't care. All right. So let me go back up to sub-processes webinar timeline, and let me make activity 1.2, which we are now going to call parent user activity. Okay, now it's got a dependence. So invoke sub-process has to stop before parent user activity begins. So let's try this again. Let's run our form. We will submit it. Submit. And my form disappeared. So what's going on with our process? Well, let's go back to our active timelines. Let's go back into our routing slip. And this time we're going to open up the routing slip options, because I can change some items here. The form was submitted, and now sub user activity is running. Now I'm seeing this by default, because show children is checked. Now, that's a default setting, show children. What this setting means is, and it's set by default, is I want to see not only the things that are happening in this process, but in any child process as well. So by default, show children is turned on, and I can turn it off as we just saw, but it's going to show me my sub-process activities. So this is my active activity. This is the activity that is in the sub-process. My main timeline can't do anything until this is done. I'm going to have to go into this sub-processes webinar timeline, and I'm not going to worry about the form. I'm just going to go ahead and complete my task from the sub-process. So we'll go in here and we'll go to the properties for this activity, and we'll go to Dale Franks, and I'm going to complete the user task. There we go. It's done. Status is completed. I'm the one who completed it, and I can go back up to my processes webinar timeline and open it up. And now we can see that the sub user activity was done, and the parent user activity now is the one that is currently running. I could, of course, kill that, which I am, in fact, going to do. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and cancel the entire process timeline. And we'll talk about asynchronous sub-processes. Asynchronous processes are always invoked not from the process activity type. In fact, we're going to have to change that to a custom task, and we are going to invoke them via the run process custom task. Now, an asynchronous process means that this process will operate while it is still a child process of the parent. It will operate independently of the parent. The parent will continue to go and will continue to work while the sub process is running. So I'm going to add the custom task. I'm going to set my container form to the processes webinar form. So if I want to do any field mapping from that parent form to the child form, that will be created whenever I invoke the sub process. I can certainly do that. We don't really have any forms controls, so that's not really relevant to what we're doing today, but we're going to open up the run process custom task. We are going to go into processes and sub-processes. We're going to go to sub-processes, and we're going to invoke again the sub-process webinar timeline. Now, normally what you would do is you would also go in to create the sub-processes form. So I would associate the new form to the sub-processes webinar form, and then I would click the add mapping button so that I could map my destination controls to the source controls that are in the processes form. My destination controls are in the sub-processes form. We don't have any controls. There's no mapping to do. So technically, I don't need to do this because of the way that my timeline is configured, but it's always a best practice just to invoke that form anyway, even if we're not going to do any mapping at all. I have to figure out what attachments I want to pass through. Obviously, if this is a timeline, we would just pass through timeline references. We're going to pass them by default to the newly attached process. So we're just going to take process references from the parent down to the child. By default, we're going to launch this as a sub-process of the current process, which means it's going to be directly related to the process. And so therefore we can still track it in the routing slip, but this sub-process is going to run independently on its own timeline. The parent process is not going to wait for it to finish like it did with the process activity type. It's just going to go ahead and run straight through. And down here on advanced, if I want to attach the source form to the new process, I can. Obviously, if I wanted to limit what gets passed, I could certainly do that. I could simply, pass documents or all, or just pass the forms, or just objects in a specific group or in no specific group, but we're fine with that for a sub-process. We'll keep that set, but we are going to come back and look at that here in a little bit because that's going to have to change whenever we start cloning processes. So we'll set that up and we'll save it. And now I can run it again. So I'm just going to run my form and submit it. And now the form is not going to go away. I don't want it to go away and don't expect it to go away. I didn't put the activity name at the top, so I don't know what activity I'm actually running, but since it is the processes webinar form, I'm going to assume that I'm running in the parent user activity for here. But I've also got another task because I am also running the child activity as well. In fact, let's go to my user profile and see what's going on here. Okay, I have two things happening at the same time. There is my processes webinar form where I am running in parent user activity. Here's my sub-processes webinar form task where I am running in the sub-user activity. So now, unlike before, both of these activities are happening concurrently because my sub-process is asynchronous. Again, if I go back into the process timeline and take a look at it, I can see that both the sub and parent user activities are now running concurrently, and I am responsible for both of them as the task assignee. So that is running asynchronously. All of this should be pretty much well understood and well-defined. Now let's make it difficult. So this is a real-world situation that really is happening. And so this is not a scenario that I'm making up out of my mind. I have a major customer that is actually doing this, and they needed a little guidance, so I provided it to them. So let's talk about cloning and also talk about invocations in a loop. I created that loop activity, and then I decided I'd actually just show you what is already built in the interest of time, because it's already 11:25. So let's explain what it is that this company needs to do. And it's directly relevant to what we're talking about today for processes and sub-processes. This is technically not going to be a sub-process. Technically, this is going to be a cloned process. So let's take a look at what we're trying to do in this process. So I have a loop. Now I'm going to need to run that loop multiple times based on whether or not someone selects a result that causes a loop. So down here in activity 2, I have a couple of results. One of them is called end and one of them is called loop. To make it obvious what we're going to do. We want to loop on demand. Sometimes I'm going to go through this timeline and it's going to do what it needs to do all in one go, which, is usually whenever we're talking about approvals, usually ideally how it's going to go. Everybody approves, we go through the loop, it never re-loops. But sometimes, you ask for a resubmittal or, for an update from the submitter, whatever the verbiage you might want to use is. In my case, I've just made it obvious. It's a loop. So I need to loop for whatever reason. But I've got this run process here. Now, I don't want to create a sub-process. So all this talk about synchronous and asynchronous sub-processes does not apply. What I actually want to do is I want to copy this process and I want it to exist as a separate process. I'm not going to share any information with it. I don't need any information back from it. I just need to clone my process. So technically, I'm not building a sub-process, but I am going to have to use the run process custom task to make this happen. And I'm going to have to do some trickery here because I don't always need to run to make the clone. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I need to define that on the form. So on the form, which again, I don't have much on the form, but I do have one thing here. I have a checkbox called create clone, right? So if I check that box, I actually want to create a clone of this process. And I want to just start that process de novo somewhere else. So I'm going to need to, there's a couple of different levels of trickery then that I need to engage in here because I have two things happening. I have a loop going on. So I'm going to have to be super careful as to what my looping condition is because I don't want to create 50 copies of the process if I click the loop result, which may happen if I pick the wrong condition. And I also don't want the process to be a sub-process. I need to create a clone. So I've got to jump through a couple of hoops for configuration to make this happen. But conceptually, it's pretty easy. I've got a loop. I've got at the end of the loop, I've got a user activity that determines whether the loop begins again or whether I want to end the loop. And at some point in the loop, I may, if I select create clone, want to create a clone of my currently running process. So let's attack the loop configuration first, and then we'll get into the clone configuration. What you would think under normal circumstances, what you'd think is if I have this result here called loop, and it is on activity 2, that's my looping activity, then what I would want to do is I would want to just use this activity result as my condition. And by the way, while we're here, I'm just checking to see if, no, the customer who, actually it was a partner, is here. They are not. Okay, so normally, as I said, you would just want to set activity 2, if activity 2 is the result is loop, and you'd want to loop the parent loop if activity 2 result was loop. If you do that, you're going to be very surprised, because what's going to happen is this is going to run multiple times. You're going to create multiple copies of the run process, or you're going to run the run process multiple times. Because here's what happens. We go through the loop starts. Run process checks to see if you've got the create clone box checked. If you don't, we skip it and we go right to activity 2. I decide, okay, we are going to want a clone, and I want to reloop my loop. So I'm going to restart the loop by selecting loop. Okay, I have now set the activity result of activity 2 to loop. So what's going to happen is it's going to go to the start of the loop. It's going to hit run process, and it's going to say, okay, create clone is checked, and it will create the clone. Then what it's going to do is it's going to say, I'm going to end my activity. I've invoked the sub process. We are good to go. I am ending. And when it ends, process director says, okay, let's check my loop and see if I am supposed to be looping or exiting or whatever. And it says, nope, restart the loop if activity 2 equals loop. Okay, we haven't reached another iteration of activity 2 yet. We're in the second iteration of run process. And once it ends, we're going to check our looping conditions to see if after ending this activity, we are required to start or exit the loop. Well, we are required to restart the loop because the result for activity 2 is still loop. So it's going to restart the loop and run the run process activity again. And when it ends, it's going to say restart the loop. Oh, yep, we do, because activity 2's result is loop. And so it will restart the activity. And what you're going to get is a number of sub or cloned processes running until the loop detection and process director says, you know, you're doing this an awful lot. So you got to stop this. All right, well, there's a way to fix that. We want to avoid that loop. That is a configuration problem. And the way that we configure that is we have created a special condition inside timeline activity, which is called last child activity result. So while I wouldn't want to set activity 2 equals loop, or the result for the activity result for activity 2 equals loop, what I will do is last child activity result equals loop. And that changes the game completely for looping, and especially when creating this run process. Because when run process completes as a child activity of the loop, run process will set a result. That result will be complete because there's no user specified result. So it defaults back to the default of complete. So when it finishes, the loop checks run again. Okay, am I supposed to get out of the loop? Am I supposed to restart the loop? What am I supposed to do? And it checks, what was the last activity result? Well, because run process has run, the last activity result was complete. And so it is not going to restart the loop because it doesn't match. It's going to go straight to activity 2 and run activity 2, where again, you can return the loop. So whenever you are doing something like setting up a run process, and by the way, it's not just for the run process activity or the process activity type. It would also apply to the notify activity type and any of the other activity types that didn't specifically have a user activity that you would invoke to complete them. It is going to run through that loop if you're looking for activity 2 specifically, if you're looking at its specific result and you're looking for loop. You don't want to do that. You're going to want to use the last activity result because activity 2's iteration, we're still in iteration 1 of activity 2. Until we reach activity 2 the second time and we click the iteration counter, loop is still the valid result for activity 2. So you do have to be careful about how you set that looping condition. Setting the appropriate looping condition makes this work just fine. But let's talk about what a clone process looks like. So we are invoking the run process custom task, just as we did previously, because obviously if we're going to clone it, it's going to run asynchronously. But what we have to do is sanitize it quite a bit. So the first thing that we need to do, obviously, we find our launch process. Now, the process that we're launching is this process. We're literally just creating another, well, it's a clone, and our configuration will make it a clone. So remember what usually happens and what all the default settings are. I'm going to pass all of my attachments and the parent form and all of that. That's going to go from the parent to the child, and vice versa is going to happen. I got to cut all of that. I don't want to share information. I don't want to share the documents. And in fact, when I restart this process, I'm probably going to need to, and in this case I've done it, I'm going to need to set some specific values on the form that gets created. So I'm going to have a little different configuration here. First thing I'm going to do, obviously, I'm going to set the timeline. So it's going to run another instance of the timeline that's currently running. I'm going to give it its own form instance. So I'm going to invoke the same form that is in the parent is the same form that I'm going to use in the child. I am going to do some change. Now, in this case, I did this just to make it easy to discriminate what the which one is the parent and which one is the child, both in the form and in the process. But it's very important that I do set this value, because remember, when this process kicks off and it kicks off the loop, that clone process activity is going to run. I want to be sure that doesn't run. So I need to uncheck that create clone text box so that it doesn't create a clone when my new activity starts. I want to, or when my new process starts, I want to give the users the decision as to whether they're going to create that clone or not once they perform their task. Attachments, I'm going to turn all of that off. On advanced, I am not going to attach the source form to the new process. This is a clone. It is not a sub process. So I have to turn all of that off. So that gets turned off. And then over here in advanced, I'm definitely going to launch as sub, or definitely going to turn off launch as sub process of current process. I want a clone that is entirely independent, that is not a child, that is not a sub process. It's going to lead its own rich, free, and independent life. By default, I don't remember what the default is for after process starts. I can't think of it off the top of my mind. So let's go back to my processes webinar. Let's look at it so we can see what the actual default is on the advanced tab. Keep original form open after starting process. Okay, great. That is our default in this particular custom task. Great. We now know that. So let's go back up here to my timeline and back into our custom task. And the default is set. So that is good. So what we've done is we've created a secondary process that we can just start off de novo. Now, I'm going to need to come back here so that we can actually see this work. Oh, did I delete everything already? Oh, very good. Very good. So let's run our form. And I'm going to call it original. And that way we'll be able to discriminate between the original form and all of the clones that are about to be created. So I can go ahead and create a clone right now and hit submit. And it will take me to my activity 2, where I get to decide whether I want to loop or end. So let's look at what's going on with our processes. Well, there we go. There's my original, and there is copy 5. Great. So I'm going to keep create clone checked, and I'm going to go ahead and loop. And well, it's taking longer than I like. There we go. There's my loop. Let's go back to active timelines. And there's copy 6. And I can do this basically as much as I want. Go back to active timeline, copy 7, and so forth. Or I can just end. And when I end, original disappears, but I'm still running copy 5, 6, and 7. I'm still running those as live process instances, but notice the names of the instances. It's timeline, and in parentheses, the only thing that appears is copy 7, submitted on 7/17, blah, 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 blah. That tells me that that is the only form that is associated with this. So there are no attachments, there are no other forms, there's nothing that connects this timeline instance with the quote unquote parent timeline instance or the timeline instance from which it was cloned. So we really, when we talk about, I guess we really have 3 types of processes. We have processes, we have sub-processes, which can be synchronous or asynchronous, and we have cloned processes, all of which we can create through Process Director with the appropriate configuration. Okay, it's 11:43, so I do have time to show you how you can break this. So let's go back to our timeline. So remember when I said the looping condition was super important. If we go back to the looping condition, and I have that jump back to the top of the loop when the condition is met. So let us say that I actually go to timeline activity, activity result, and I pick a loop. And I hit OK. And I hit OK. here. So now activity result loop equals loops. So we're going to go ahead and save this. And we're going to go ahead and submit our form. So we can see what happens whenever we improperly set up a looping condition. So we're now going to run, and we're going to still call this original. We'll call it original 2. And I'm going to hit create clone, and I'm going to submit. Now, so far, I don't much care. Nothing bad is going to happen to me. If I go back to my active timelines, there is original 2 and copy 8. And in fact, while we're here, we might as well just go ahead and delete those so that they don't confuse us. Okay, I'm pretty happy so far. And now I'm in activity 2. I'm going to keep create clone selected, and I'm going to hit loop here. And oh, it went away. There's some other configuration I would need to change to break this, I think. But there's still copy 8. So let me go back into my timeline and do a couple of things here. So I've got that set up. As you saw, by the way, it just failed, right? I'm just going to get rid of that dependence. I'm now trying to get it back into the state in which it breaks all the time. And I was hoping that just making that one change would do it. Because what I wanted to show was a runaway loop because of my condition. And loop. And the form goes away. Okay. I'd have to go back and import another broken version of it so that I can actually show you a runaway loop. I guess I can't do that. And I guess it's not all that important to see a runaway loop, but it's actually still erroring out. This time it's not making, the loop is not working the way it is supposed to work. So, okay. I'd have to go back and recreate it. I'm not going to put you through that, especially since it's already 11:47 and we only have 13 minutes max left. So I think with the error of the loop just not working, we'll end it there, and we won't get to see the fun of endless loops being created, which is only fun when used as an example, not whenever you're trying to configure something on your system. In any event, we're done. Have a great week. We will look forward to talking to you again next week. Until then, so long.